Hey, what's up you guys? Scotty here, just having fun playing games, making videos. Welcome to episode 1 of my Avatar Challenge series in Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. If you haven't seen my intro video for the series, I highly recommend watching that first. That way you know what the challenge is all about and what the rules are. You can find the link down below. For those of you that don't want to go back, here's a quick recap. The challenge, in a nutshell, is playing and unlocking all unit avatars using only the units whose avatars are already unlocked. And you know what that means. My first victory will be supremely unexpected. Okay, so obviously I knew trying to win a game with only villagers straight out of the gate would be an uphill battle in which I'd first be losing some games, no, a lot of games, in order to achieve. My skill level isn't horrible for a casual player, but I'm far and away from any level of pro. So of course, my first game goes swimmingly. I realize immediately when trying to build my first house that all of my hotkeys are completely messed up. I spend the entire part of the match trying to reset my key bindings back to Definitive Edition default, but for some reason it just doesn't work. I figure I'm going to lose regardless, so I just roll with it and do my best to adapt. Then, to no one's surprise, my opponent suddenly appears with an army of archers and begins harassing me. I manage to put up some towers for defense and repel the attack, but before long he builds a castle on my doorstep. With no adequate defense ready, and my current supply of stone cut off, I know it's just going to be a drawn-out defeat if I keep going, so I give him the GG and resign. After the match, I take time to fix all my hotkeys and realize the problem wasn't exclusive to that match like I initially thought. Somehow, by making a new Steam account, most of the hotkeys for the default profile had been reassigned, but I have no idea how or why it happened. My second game goes much better than the first. My hotkeys are all correct, my early game is smooth with no early rushes, I wall off my base, build up my economy with lots of town centers, finish a couple of castles, and even managed to beat my opponent to Imperial Age. But, right as I'm building my third castle, along comes the first wave. Thankfully, I managed to complete the castle and hold on until all of the enemy units are picked off. Afterwards, I feel I have amassed enough villagers, so I go on the offensive to attack his nearby castle. At the same time, some enemy cavalry slaughter what was supposed to be my secret wood line. Turns out that location was actually right next to the enemy base in plain view. Back at my first offensive battle, I'm greeted with the wonderful surprise of almost 24 arbalists mowing down half my villagers, while the other half stand around being useless. I'm so tunnel visioned I don't even notice. By the time I do, it's too late. Over half my villagers are dead, and the few reinforcements coming in start dying before even reaching the castle. So I give up and pull back. My economic efforts to expand outside my base are then foiled by the enemy cavalry, though I did manage to clean things up soon enough. I try attacking the castle again since the enemy had not repaired it, but that doesn't go well at all. When I start building my fourth castle, the enemy then decides it was time for me to die. Bombard cannons begin shelling my southern fortifications, while an army of cavalry come barreling into my northern expansion. In just a few seconds, one of my town centers falls, and I make a desperate move to attack the bombards and take the enemy castle again. The enemy tries blocking my incoming horde of Spaniards, but I'm able to reach the castle and finally finish it off. Unfortunately, the bombards survive, and my forward force gets annihilated by arbalists and cavalry. The enemy then advances into my main base, picking off dozens of villagers and completely stalling my food production. When I finally finish off the cavalry, force a retreat on the enemy archers, and get things rolling again, I find that my northern castle is gone. The pesky bombards had come back, and I'm met with not one, but 3 castles. My villagers are just lambs to the slaughter. Another wave of cavalry coming from the north, and I knew there was no way I could stop it. I was done for. Another glorious loss for me. I hope I really can turn the tide of this challenge, y'all. In my next game, I'm harassed early on, so it takes me a while to build up my base. And just when I thought I might have a chance, along come trebuchets and another defeat. And another defeat. But
fortune favors the bold.
And bold I was. I start the next game off fairly well. I plan ahead with all my defenses, erecting some towers. I deal with some early harassment, and even advance to the castle age well before my opponent. At this point, my economy is booming, and my castle is standing tall. And then come the Rams. And the Knights. I thought for sure the Rams would be enough to take my castle down, and that I would just slowly lose again. But, shortly later, to my surprise, the Rams are in pieces, the Knights in retreat, and my castle is still standing. I look at the score and realize I might actually have a chance at winning, but right as I make it to the Imperial Age, my opponent pushes forward once more. I fight off his Rams, but he finishes building his second castle before I can stop him. I knew it was time for an all-in counterattack, or I would lose. I keep all my villagers garrisoned until just the right moment, and then I now have fully upgraded villagers with supremacy and sappers, and knew I could take the castles. My opponent can't help but laugh at the absurdity unfolding before him. I take down the first castle and charge at the second, ignoring the enemy knights and conquistadors. With no economy left, I send in all of my remaining villagers in a last hope to finish off his castle, which I do. I then retreat to save as many villagers as I can. I couldn't believe it. I had pushed the enemy back and now still had enough villagers left to rebuild. It takes me a while to get my footing again, but soon enough I'm inching forward with a new castle in range of the enemy's other castle and siege workshop, which slowly get whittled down. Then my enemy surprises me with trebuchets, so I do another all-in rush before I lose another castle. I manage to get his trebuchets to back off, but then I find myself surrounded by enemy conquistadors, which I know I can't take on directly, so I attack the enemy's already damaged castle to try and finish it off. I immediately realize, though, that I won't succeed without either more reinforcements or some kind of forward defense, so I start a forward castle and bring in all the villagers I can spare to build it. The castle goes up, I garrison as many villagers as I can, and tell the rest to attack the enemy trebuchets. Somehow, I turn the tide. With the enemy army vanquished and in retreat, I'm now in a position to knock down the enemy castles. The enemy tries repairing, but I focus his villagers down, and before long, his castle collapses. I press on, and down another castle. And another castle! With my morale at an all-time high, I furiously continue boosting my economy. After maxing out in population, I build a castle on his doorstep. I finish off his conquistadors, and launch my first actual attack on his main base and forward town center. He manages to sneak his own castle behind the front lines, so I task my entire force of lumberjacks to destroy it. Continuing forward, I down some military buildings and then strike at the heart of his main base, his starting town center. At this point, I start to wonder if my opponent was actually just letting me win, or maybe he had stopped playing altogether. After all my previous defeats, it seemed too good to be true. But, true it was. I take another 10 minutes or so to slowly finish off all his buildings and villagers, and then, finally, I win. I was so proud when I could finally change my profile icon from villager to militia. But then, disaster strikes. And I was not even aware of the calamity that had befallen me during the game, but the most horrendous thing had happened. I didn't get my achievement because I had trained a military unit. My victory was not supremely unexpected. Yes, indeed. While I was playing, I had accidentally trained a conquistador. Let's take a look. Okay, in case you didn't see, what happened was I was selecting idle villagers to build more farms, and one of the idle villagers was garrisoned in the castle. So, I had hit Q for economic buildings, intending to then hit F and build a farm, But because the villager was garrisoned, I was never actually selecting the villager, I was selecting the castle. And of course, when the castle is selected and you hit Q, you train a unique unit. Tunnel vision for the win. So, the conquistador finishes training and goes to the gold mines as if he was a villager. Hey, he's just like the ugly dachshund. Anyways, he just keeps hanging out while I build up more economy, selecting him along with villagers, building more town centers and castles, and all the while I'm completely oblivious to his very existence. So, when I had started building this castle here, I select him along with all my other villagers in the area and send them to help build. Mr. Conky comes down, starts shooting at the enemy conquistadors, and then gets garrisoned when the castle is finished. He stays inside while I take down the first two enemy castles, but is then let out to go attack the third castle, and because he's on horseback and can move faster than all the villagers, he dies as soon as he gets in range of the enemy castle. And that, my friends, is the story of the conquistador that ruined my achievement. I wrestled for a long time with whether I should move on with the challenge or not. After all, I was completely oblivious the whole time, and it's not like that one unit did anything to change the outcome of the game. But that little OCD voice inside my head just wouldn't quit. So, conscious of my past mistake, intending full well to catch myself should I accidentally queue up a military unit again, I set off trying to win another game with just villagers. I quickly realized, though, that my first win had indeed been a stroke of luck, as I get beaten quite easily again. And again. And then, old technical difficulties shows up and ruins my day. You see, I had not realized that the file pathway for my saved recordings had been reset after installing software updates weeks ago. So, all of my recordings were now being put on my C drive. If I was still on my old desktop, this wouldn't be a problem. On my laptop, however, the drives are set up differently. My C drive is partitioned to have plenty of space for my operating system, essential software, and any future updates, but it is not partitioned to store hundreds of gigabytes worth of video recordings. I have a completely separate hard drive for that. So, after playing and losing several more games and then finally winning again, there I was with no recording to show for it because I was already maxed out on available space, despite my software having told me the whole time that it was on and working as normal. Thankfully, Age of Empires has its own built-in replay system, so all is not lost. I can still finish this video. You guys just won't be able to see everything from my perspective as I play the game. Now, I know the replays have the view lock function, which is great, but it's still not quite the same in my opinion. Thankfully, this won't be happening again. It's just a shame it had to happen with one of the most entertaining games this challenge is likely to see. Alright, on to the replay of the game that is the true, supremely unexpected victory. So, I'm off to a good start when... Yep, that happened. Let's just pretend that it didn't, though. Moving on. The rest of the early game actually goes pretty well with nothing out of the ordinary. The real action starts right before I hit Feudal Age. Up until now, I had decided that I didn't want to be cheap with tower rushes, as the whole point of the challenge is to use the particular unit itself as the primary means of offense, not buildings. But at this point, I'm tired of losing over and over, so I decide to scout my enemy to find a good place to set up some towers. When I reach his base, however, I discover impending doom. The enemy town center is already a pile of rubble. I knew a classic Persian town center drop was imminent, and sure enough, the enemy is now building his double hit point town center just 3 squares away from my own town center. I immediately pull all of my foraging villagers to attack, hoping to kill his villagers, but I quickly realize that his town center is going up too fast to do anything worthwhile. I safely pull all villagers into my town center just before his finishes. And now begins the long war of attrition. With adrenaline surging, I set a villager to prepare my TC, grateful that I had focused gathering wood earlier, then queue up more villagers, but after the next one finishes, I get supply blocked. I also almost lose that last villager, but manage to save him in time. I task him to build a tower to get more damage going on the enemy town center, followed by a second. I work on getting more stone for even more towers, and I build some farms since my berries are in a vulnerable spot. I see my enemy start his own towers, so I put down a blacksmith to get fletching so my towers can outrange his. Unfortunately, I just don't have the resources to research it. At this point, my enemy has another tower, and I no longer have a surplus of wood for repairs. I try building a third tower, but that doesn't work out. Then, my enemy gets my TC low enough to evict my garrison villagers. It's time to go all in.
Attack the tree!
No! TC!
Attack the TC!
Even with all but 2 of my villagers attacking, it still takes a minute, but soon enough, I demolish his TC and get to work on the tree. No, I mean towers. 1 tower goes down, and now it's time to mine some gold. No, I mean get the other tower. When they're both down, I try to have a villager fight, but we're evenly matched, so I give up. I try to garrison back in my town center that is somehow still standing, but it's still too damaged. Lucky for me, the enemy gives up and retreats. I pursue him a short way just for good measure, then head back home. Looking at the score, my hopes of him having gone all in are crushed. I knew he had kept some villagers back to continue gathering resources. I spend the next 8 minutes or so rebuilding enough to advance to the castle age, and then I start expanding with additional town centers. Soon enough, I have a castle built in a great spot up on a hill where I can protect both the nearby wood line and my main base. Another 5 minutes of booming goes by, and my enemy reaches the Imperial Age. But I'm not worried. I've already started putting more villagers on gold, and 3 minutes later, I start researching the Imperial Age myself. And then, just when I thought my enemy would never attack me again, he sends in a wave of heavy cavalry. I pull back my exposed villagers to safety, but he manages to pick off several. I start constructing some towers for defense and garrison space, and just as I hit Imperial Age, I see him head across the backside of my base. So I garrison the closest villagers in the town center, but then my enemy holds off and just attacks my nearby house and mining camp. Realizing I need more defense, I drop down a castle and bring in extra villagers to help. But the enemy notices and starts killing off my builders. The towers can't kill the cavalry fast enough, so I lose almost all of them. To make sure I can finish the castle, I ungarrison all my villagers from the 2 closest town centers and task them all to finishing the castle. Knowing the cavalry will die soon anyway, I go back to focusing on economy. I put my villagers back to work and prepare for future attacks with another castle. A short while later, another wave of cavalry come in on my west flank, but I just move my villagers off wood before they get there. Then I see my enemy has built a siege workshop and amassed a large force of paladins. I knew he would attack soon, and sure enough, he starts building a castle. I know I gotta beat him to it, so I lay down one of my own and do another all-in with every villager I can muster. I try to juke my opponent by sending my villagers to attack his castle, and then I pull them back to build my own. The trick works, and my castle finishes first. I then ring the town bell and watch as my enemy gets picked off from all the arrow fire. Unfortunately, my opponent also has a few rams, so my castle's health begins dropping fast. I ungarrison my villagers and start attacking the rams. Then I ungarrison more villagers to repair the castle. As more of his paladins fall to my arrows, my castle remains standing and the tide turns. The enemy's newly incoming rams are blocked by my repairing villagers. Now, with the enemy's offensive crushed, I ungarrison all my villagers and send them to destroy his castle. My villagers are now upgraded with supremacy and accomplish their task with ease. Knowing my own castle will take care of the enemy units, I then focus my villagers on the siege workshops. The enemy tries sending in war elephants, but they're too slow to maneuver through my swarm and easily get taken down. With my population now maxed out, I head north and begin slowly decimating everything in my path. I ignore the war elephant killing my villagers since my town centers are just replacing villagers as fast as they die. I demolish the enemy's western wall, and when I see the enemy building a castle, I try building my own to counter. Unfortunately, I have so many villagers that I can't get them to move off the foundation to start building. I move away and try again, but I'm so jittery with adrenaline that I make the same mistake twice. Determined to get it right this time, I leave most of my villagers sitting ducks and select just a handful to place the castle in a clear spot. I then bring in all of my villagers and quickly build the castle. The enemy kills off most of my villagers, but I still manage to garrison a full 20 inside. I send in reinforcements, but unfortunately they get killed as soon as they arrive. I try my best to round up stragglers around the map, but it's just not good enough. I quickly begin to lose my foothold, as the enemy chases off my villagers and surrounds my castle. Knowing I've bitten off more than I can chew, I begin to build a castle in a much less greedy position. My forward castle gets low enough to evict its garrison, so I just move them back to help build the other castle. With my forward position completely gone, I begin a much more steady approach, ensuring each new castle is covered by a previous one. The enemy wisens up and builds some trebuchets. Knowing even one trebuchet will knock down my castle soon enough, I rush forward, but then retreat to draw the enemy paladins into my castle fire. But he doesn't fall for it and retreats himself. I try once more to reach the trebuchets and succeed. One goes down, and then the other. Seeing an opening, I attack the enemy castle, but retreat as soon as the paladins come back. This time, the enemy gets lured in and stays in range trying to attack my castle as I use my villagers to block. Soon enough, the enemy knows he can't win, so he saunters back home as I pick off his stragglers. Another trebuchet arrives, so I rush in and pick it off. Realizing I've neglected my economy, I try to put some idle villagers back to work, but it ends up costing me villagers on the battlefront. I return them to the safety of the castle and begin repairs. The enemy desperately tries to take it down, but soon realizes the futility and pulls back. I trade for more stone at the market and start another castle, continuing to inch my way forward. Seeing the new trebuchets and paladins, I instantly formulate another ploy. I attack his stable, drawing his forces to the east. Then, I double back and rush his trebuchets. The war elephants try to block, but they're too slow. I down the trebuchets and then begin tearing down his castle. My opponent desperately tries to kill all my villagers, but I have too many. A moment later, the castle falls, and I retreat to safety. The enemy then gets annihilated by my castles. I've won the battle, but I still have to win the war, so I don't relax for a second. I add on more town centers and start rounding up all my scattered villagers, sending them to the front lines. Now, with my forces regrouped and reinforced, I once again... Surprisingly, I met with no resistance. Either my enemy has regrouped elsewhere and doesn't care, or he is dead in the water with no resources. Either way, I'm content to destroy everything in sight. After decimating nearly every building in his base, I finally stumble across his new expansion and some archers. They are, of course, no match for my villagers. I then find his last remaining town center and destroy it. And with that, he declares good game. Yes! I did it! I won! And this time, my victory was indeed supremely unexpected! So, yeah, I got my achievement, and now I can officially and legitimately change my portrait to the militia. Aw, yeah. Well, that's it, y'all. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I had so much fun making it, and I hope you'll be tuning in again for the next episode, where I'll be performing a little dark humor.